We are in our form a manifestation of the universe, a manifestation of absolute reality, a manifestation of truth. Yet I cannot describe this truth, I cannot describe this reality. I can only be it. I can only be, as you can only be. And this individual perspective, this I amness, this I am, this consciousness, is not a who, it's a what. And the words that come forth when I say what is formless awareness, manifesting as human being. And so there are a lot of stories out there in the spiritual practice field of those who have achieved deeper or lesser experiences of awakening or enlightenment. And the impulse there is to start talking about it, and initially you can't because there are no words that one initially has available to describe this. It's wow, man. It's just like, what the fuck? You know, what was that? And then you calm down. Well, hopefully you calm down over years, maybe weeks, months, decades. So why the impulse to talk? I began to realize what was stopping me from seeing, from feeling, from being here. And I realized it was all these things I had accumulated and sought as knowledge. Personal experience, school experience, life experiences, books, magazines, satsangs, seminars. What happens is that I began to get a sense from the stories of what an enlightened being was supposed to look like, sound like, feel like. And therefore I would walk around with these filters of assumed knowledge of what it was supposed to look like and feel like. And my experience was, no, doesn't match the expectation, therefore I'm not it. I'm not awake. I'm not aware enough. You know, it's not matching up. And I began through that realization to see how knowledge and that sense of knowledge and that sense of knowing can get in the way of seeing. I can look and not see. I can listen to sounds but really not hear. Presence and reality is always available. It's never anywhere else. It's not in India solely, it's not in the US solely, it's not on some Caribbean island solely, it's not in any individual solely. It's everywhere. And what was in the way of seeing was knowing. I thought I knew. And I had to get accustomed to not knowing mind, because to not know could make you look like clueless, or you're stupid, or you're inattentive, or you're irresponsible, or you're just a flake. See, you act. I acted. We all act. I act. Different roles. Trying to be a responsible human being, a courteous human being, a compassionate human being, a thoughtful human being. This isn't necessarily what I started out to talk about. I thought I was going to limit my discussion to consciousness and the content of consciousness, but every time I get in front of the camera, or I take pen in hand and I begin to write in my journal, I have to admit, I don't know anymore what's going to come out. Until I write it, until I say it, until I record it and video it, until I live it. And what I'm trying to do here is to have people recognize, self-recognize, because I'm talking to self when I'm talking to you. And you and self are the same. Not the same individual storyline, case history, but the same. I was very much biased, relying on the left hemisphere of the brain that deals with logic and language and linear. And I was not really terribly receptive to the right hemisphere, its emotions, its sensations, its feelings, its intuitions, its dreams, because that was all somewhat unreliable. But that's sort of the dialogue between the mind and the heart, where the mind is always deconstructing, taking apart, analyzing, or trying to understand. And the heart is about embracing, not under any sense of obligation, but genuinely embracing everything. Nothing is excluded. And when I feel that sense of no in me and it arises, inevitably it's the mind saying, no, that's not proper. That's not acceptable. That's not whatever. That doesn't make any sense. That's stupid. That's just ignorant. That's just too horrible. That's ridiculous. That's mean and vicious. In the individual mode, everything I take and experience is a personal experience. But when I access consciousness and presence, I experience a certain detachment and a recognition that the universe simply is as it is. There is no wrong or bad or right and evil and good. There's none of that. Everything simply is as it is. And it's only mind that jumps in and says, yeah, what is that? It is as it is. What is that? What do you mean by that? Mind. But in the cosmos, nada. It's all simply as it is. And I had a very small, tiny, protected heart that could not embrace that kind of stuff. And my early years was creating self-defenses. Castle walls and moats and getting archers and things. And as I progressed, I realized, no, I can't take all of that armor with me. It becomes very inconvenient to move around. My freedom of movement became limited. My emotional, psychological freedom of movement became limited by those things that I knew. And I had to look at what kind of mind I had. And you might be driven or not, out of curiosity, see what kind of mind do you have? Is it a flexible mind or a rigid mind? Is it an open mind or a closed mind? Is it a happy mind or a sad mind? Is it a curious mind or a paranoid mind? Because depending on the kind of mind you have, you're going to create the perceptual, emotional, psychological world that you live in, that you inhabit. And don't automatically assume that what your mind interprets for you is how it actually is. And it doesn't take very long in any kind of a meditation practice, even if it's only for a moment when you have that quietness, that stillness, to see that. Of course, what mind does, after it sees it, it kind of loses its, oh, I got to write that down. I got to record that. I got to remember that. I got to remember that. Otherwise, whatever. It's always available. Presence never goes anywhere. I used to say, show me, I'm from Missouri, show me that there is something called consciousness. Show me this oneness. And I was always very disturbed by the silence I got back. Until I realized reality doesn't have to prove itself to anybody. Least of all me. Your ordinary consciousness is sufficient for you to awaken. You don't have to become an extreme yoga, meditator, anything. You already are.